So again, thank you all for joining us this morning in this virtual meditation hall. So it was a little over a month ago that I sent out a letter to our community. I said, "Dear friends in the Dharma, I send you my heartfelt wishes for the well-being of you, your families, and circles of friends. Our world has suddenly entered a time of rapid change and instability, wherein many of the anchors that have given us solidity to our life have become unmoored. Impermanence and not knowing are no longer simply Dharma catchwords, but the day-to-day experience of many in the world. At this time, each one of us has a tremendous opportunity to strengthen our Dharma practice, to learn how to cultivate or strengthen a mind of calmness and stability, and to show up in the world with understanding and kindness." And then I went through how we were starting the virtual meditation hall, weekday mornings and evenings. I said, as individuals and as a community, we have entered uncharted and perhaps quite rough waters, and as your teacher and founder of our community, I want to be there for you and announce there'll be more opportunities for online interviews and small groups, etc., etc. So, this morning I want to take time, a month into it, to kind of look at where we are at, not as a community. So, a month ago, I said, at this time, each one of us has had a tremendous opportunity to strengthen our Dharma practice, to learn how to cultivate or strengthen a mind of calmness and stability, and to show up in the world with understanding and kindness. So please just close your eyes for a moment. We have now been in this lockdown, sequestering mode for over a month. Various permutations even before that got us to this point. Many of us have now been isolated in various degrees for over a month. Our round of daily activities and interactions has become severely limited. Or primarily, most of them are virtual. As well as many of us have been affected, or some of us have been affected by the way we work, and even if we're working, as the effects of this ripples through our community and then the world, so to speak. We have learned to be suspicious and careful of the threat of the virus, either for ourselves or not to become a carrier to affect others. We're very careful about our hands and what they're touching, not only around our face, but also objects in the world. We've learned to be very careful around people, to keep our distance. We've learned when we're out and about to cover our face with a mask and we see other people with a mask on. So please ask yourself, have I used this past month as an opportunity to strengthen my Dharma practice, to learn how to cultivate or strengthen a mind of calmness and stability, and to show up in the world with understanding and kindness. And this is not a question to bring up any of the ego states of getting down on yourself or judging yourself. This is really just a simple kind of assessment, objective. Many of us have been on sort of an enforced semi-retreat. Perhaps those of us who live in home environments that are a little more chaotic, children, roommates, partners, spouses, we are now spending much more time with. A different kind of retreat. But we've all, in a certain way, our lifestyle has been much more circumscribed. Assess. Have I been using the experiences to deepen my practice? Not just my formal meditation practice, but my practice of non-self. My practice of selflessness, my practice of kindness, compassion, understanding, patience. And again, perhaps our assessment is mixed. We can see where we have used it, and perhaps we can see where we haven't. We've missed opportunities. We've wasted time. In the Lojong it says, turns adversity into the path of awakening. Have I been using any adversity in myself, in my relations with others, in the world around me? Have I been using this to enter more deeply the path of freedom and liberation from suffering? Or not? Again, it's just an assessment. In the Buddha Dharma, we don't go down the path of guilt or shame or blame. Those are all wasted and aversive mind states. But we are willing to take an unvarnished look, especially at ourselves. And if we see our shortcomings, where we come up short, we can assess, acknowledge, and then simply vow, commit to do better going forward. Now, part of the review for today is over these past month or so, I think I've given 3 Dharma talks. I think they were called Dharma Medicine for a Pandemic. You know, we don't just take the medicine once. If we have a chronic condition, we may have to take it daily, as directed. It is often said that the Buddha was the physician, his Dharma was the prescriptions, and we, the students, are the patients. So let me review with us all together some of the Dharma medicines that have been offered to help us not only get through these difficult times, perhaps, but even in a certain inner way to prosper. The first teachings that I pulled out of the Dharma medicine bag were the Three Fierce Mantras of Tsongpa Gyare. Teachings that several times over these past years I've brought out. And they are, whatever has to happen, let it happen. Whatever the situation is, it is fine. And the third, I really don't need anything to be happy. Again, a mantra are words of power, traditionally. In sort of the earlier pre-Buddhist magical days, mantras were thought to have power, especially to destroy obstacles. These are three fierce mantras. Fierce implies a certain intensity, usually in response to intensity of the situation. They're short, they're brief, but they go to the point. Whatever has to happen, let it happen. Well, we can look back over this past month and whatever we thought was going to happen, wanted to happen, didn't want to happen, any kind of ideas that we thought about, and if we were paying attention to the news, they were endlessly, from morning till night, generating all possibilities, and still do. And yet, things unfolded according to causes and conditions, myriad causes and conditions, good and bad, helpful and unhelpful, historical causes, political causes, personal, economic, all kinds of variables unfolding over this past month. When we look back, we realize, yeah, whatever had to happen, happened, according to causes and conditions. That's what it means. And all my thoughts and all my angers and all my worries and all my projections onto the world, myself, other people, everything unfolded according to causes and conditions, and here I am. In Buddhism, we talk about the twin polarities of hope and fear. Many people live in hope and fear. They hope things will unfold a certain way. They're afraid they won't. The Buddha called that polarity a polarity of suffering. Because when our hopes are fulfilled, we're happy, and when our fears are realized, we are unhappy. And underneath that is a chronic kind of worry. We're afraid that things will not go personally, interpersonally, for others, for the world, the pandemic, whatever it is. We would love a certain outcome, we hope for a certain outcome, but we're afraid it won't. And so we're left with this anxiety, this worry, this anger, this sadness and disappointment. Whatever the situation is, it's fine. And please, again, as I said, this is not a fine like it's all good. Fine meaning whatever the situation is, I can practice. Whatever the situation is, I will practice. The Dharma gives me the tools. In its body of teachings, its body of practices, and its meditations, I have the tools. That whatever the situation is, it is fine because I can deal with it. I don't need anything, I really don't need anything to be happy. Perhaps, they say for many people, because our life has become so much circumscribed, many of the usual activities, the going out, the going interactions, were not available to us, are not available to us. We are on sort of a retreat. Have we learned how little we need to be happy? Have we taken the limitation of our life as a learning? So many things that I involved myself in that I thought I needed to be happy. Have I come to realize I really don't need anything to be happy, as long as I have the capacity within myself to generate happiness, to generate well-being, to generate ease. No matter what's going on, I can always be appreciative and grateful. So, that was the first offering to the community. Please take a moment to reflect. Have you remembered them this past month? And have you made any attempt to practice them, to use them, to free yourself from suffering whenever you got stuck? Did you remind yourself that whatever is going to happen, so just let it happen? Which is not a passivity. It doesn't mean you don't act, but it means you don't emotionally get fixated, get stuck. You understand causes and conditions. You understand whatever situation you've been in, it's fine time to practice. And that we don't need anything to be happy. Thing, that is. Just ask yourself for a moment, have I been aware of these three fierce mantras? Have I taken them out and used them? Once or twice? Many, many times? They are meant to be used. They are words of power. Have we remembered them? And have we used them? Please reflect on that. If the physician has given us the medicine, but we don't take it, one, how are we going to get well? And two, who's really to blame? Do we blame the doctor? Do we blame the medicine and say it's not effective if we haven't taken it as prescribed? Again, for those of you who love to get down the path of shame or guilt or self-blame, not just more of the same. Please don't do that. Just assess. Get to know yourself. Get to know the way you sabotage. If you took all the trouble to go to the doctor, if you took all the trouble to get assessed, diagnosed, if a good treatment was set out for you, but you forgot to take the medicine, and you notice that you're still ill, you're still sick, constantly or intermittently, just from this moment on, make a commitment. I will take the medicine as prescribed. I think of the second Dharma talk, again, I think I was dealing with the unfolding of the situation, but I think I focused on the Five Remembrances. Everyone knows the Five Remembrances. Many people can say them by heart. Again, they are powerful medicine for these times. To remind ourselves, whether it's growing old, whether it's being sick, whether it's to die, that is the nature of all of us. All of us participate in it. It's interesting for this coronavirus that sort of brings together aging and sickness, because we know the population often most at risk are the elderly. I'm of the nature to grow old and get frail. I am of the nature, the body is of the nature to get sick. And we know that other high risk factors for this virus are people who are already have compromised immune systems because of other types of illnesses. Again, this is not unfolding in some alternative universe. This is unfolding in the universe of sickness, old age, and death of human bodies. Everyone is subject to change. We are all destined to be separated from loved ones and from everything. Of course, we would love that separation to come in a calm, beautiful way. But death doesn't often come. That separation often doesn't come in that way. Again, sort of reinforcing the earlier fierce mantras. The fifth is, my actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground on which I stand. Isn't that true? At the end of the day, each of us moment to moment, are the recipients of the actions of our body, speech, and mind that have come with us into this moment. From all our actions of body, speech, and mind in the past, and all the variables and actions of body, speech, and mind of those around us who raised us and influenced us. How do we know which thoughts are ours and which thoughts are theirs? Which impulses are ours, which impulses are theirs? Which mind state is ours and which mind state is theirs? We don't have a clue. But all we know is we are the heir of all that, and they are arising now. This is the only place where our freedom lies. Our freedom does not lie in the past. Our freedom does not lie in the future. Our freedom only lies in this moment and how we relate to this moment and how we relate to the arising of the consequences of the actions of body, speech, and mind from our past. This is the moment of change. There is no other moment. As I said earlier in the meditation, we can have all kinds of vows and commitments, but it is only in the present moment, it is only in the now, that the possibility of change occurs. Because it's only right now that the actions of our body, speech, and mind unfold anew. That is why we need to be mindful. We need to be careful, we need to be aware, we need to be vigilant. So we don't let the opportunity for transformation and healing pass away. And then last week, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from people who I've talked to. We talked about the 6 knacks, or sicknesses, or inclinations of human beings, sentient beings. Kind of a unique teaching, of which I could find no, other than hearing it being taught by a Tibetan teacher, I could not find any reference for it. And if you remember, they're very interesting. We love to be needy. If we're not needing something, there's something wrong. There's always this underlying sense of dissatisfaction. There's always this itch that needs to be scratched. Needing, wanting. Again, I won't go into it because we talked about it last week. And we have this knack, we have this love, we have this inclination toward being naughty, to not listening to instructions, to being disobedient. To be bad. If not in ourselves, we like to read about it or see movies about it. Even those of us who reject immorality, we're still kind of fascinated by it and love to read about or see movies about or read books about people who are immoral. Third, we have a knack for violence, whether personally in our own life or just being kind of fascinated. We have a knack, an interest, an inclination And we can see it again, as I said probably last week, in our choice of movies and books and video games and, what's reported in the world. You know, so much of what's reported is violence. Human beings everywhere. And it's not just, modern civilizations. At this time of life, there are still ancient civilizations, indigenous civilizations, living very different ways, and yet there it is, violence. Why can't people live at peace with one another? It seems so simple. Fourth, we love to be careless and lazy. We love to take the easy way. We love to let things slide. We have a million excuses and rationalizations. Interesting. I mean, if you ever watch the animal kingdom, it's not as if they don't know how to rest, but they're very busy every day. Meeting their needs, making sure they have enough food, shelter, water. I mean, they're very active. It's not as if they don't rest, but they're not lazy. Laziness means like there's something that needs to be done, but I just don't want to do it. Procrastination, that's another thing we call it. Anyhow, we just have a knack for being lazy, human beings. And the fifth one is we love to be dependent, we love to be controlled, we love to be the victim. We love to turn over power to somebody else and blame them for our life, our emotional states, our feelings. And for some, the sixth one, for some bizarre reason, we love wrong view. Somehow when we have wrong view, we feel more alive. Living our life according to right view somehow seems a little dull. Doesn't have quite the energy. When our mind is covered by wrong view, we see a self in others or ourselves where there isn't one. We think things are permanent and react accordingly. We find what is inherently unsatisfying, satisfying and pleasurable and pursue it. We get very energized. We have a knack for wrong view. Anyhow, I only say this again because I said it last week and maybe you don't remember. Or maybe you do remember now, you go, oh, that's right, that's what but did we really reflect on it, This is such an important piece of Dharma, my friends, that we skip over. The Buddha did not say, listen to my teaching, these days read my teaching, and then practice. He said, no. Listen or read. Then he said, reflect. Reflect means we stop and we chew on it. How many of us have really reflected on these teachings? The Three Fierce Mantra, the Five Remembrances, the 6 inclinations or knacks. How many of us really reflected on it? What's being said here? Really trying to understand them. What's being said here? And then, without any personal bias, asking ourselves, is this true? Forgetting about my own personal thoughts or interests or how I think I am or other people are. If I just took an objective view of life and human beings, is this true? Are these teachings true? Are they helpful? Are they meaningful? Do they open up my eyes in certain ways to something I wouldn't see on my own? There has to be that reflection. And if we come to the conclusion that there is some intelligence, some wisdom to these teachings, some insight, some goodness, then I need to reflect on my life and whether I want to practice it, bring them into my life. Am I really committed, serious? And it's only after that process that we practice. See, but many of us, we go right from hearing the teachings to then thinking we're going to practice, and then we don't practice. We forget to practice. We never implement. Again, it's like we go to the doctor, we know we're sick, we trust the doctor, gives us the medicine, we go home, and we forget to take the medicine. And we stay sick. Now, maybe we forget to take the medicine or just take it now and then or intermittently or only when we feel like it because we haven't really reflected. Am I really sick? And am I unable on my own to cure my illness? 2, do I trust the person who I've gone to that they have the capacity, the understanding, the insight, the intelligence, the experience to understand what's wrong with me and to prescribe accordingly? Have I really reflected on that? Do I really trust the process? Trust the person? So, have I really reflected on my illness and that I can't cure it by myself? I can't get out of my own way. I can't get beyond this little world that my mind has created. I can't see beyond myself. I can't see beyond my thoughts. I can't see beyond my conditioning. Have I really acknowledged that? Have I really come to so I'm going to the doctor because I need help. Have we really come to that point? Because if we have, then when we go to the doctor, we'll really be very attentive. And when the doctor prescribes, if we trust, and we've gone through this whole process, and we trust the doctor, and see the degrees up on the wall, and knows that he's been doing it for 20 years, and we go, okay, yeah, I will take the medicine as prescribed. So how many of us have gone through this process? Or how many of us just are like sponges for teaching? Especially these days, where you can just keep ordering endless Dharma books from Amazon. And you can be endlessly listening to podcasts and Dharma talks by all kinds of teachers and reading Buddhist periodicals. We can be endlessly consuming Dharma. But if we are not reflecting deeply in this very, very personal way, if we're not introspective, if we haven't chewed the food well, it will not nourish us as much as it can. We might get some nourishment from it, that's the case. These 6 sicknesses, I think, are very helpful because they point out to us what gets in our way. This endless neediness for stimulation, for pleasure, for people, for that we're always, there's a sense of dis-ease. There's an itch that always needs to be scratched in everything. This attraction for, the lazy, the easy way. This attraction for pleasure, this fascination for violence and, being naughty. Love to be disobedient. Well, again, if whatever the rule or regulation or person that you're being disobedient to, there's a real good reason to be. Like they're saying or telling you to do something that's fundamentally wrong, immoral, not good for you, yeah, then maybe it's good to be disobedient at times. But is that really the case with us? Even in our society, we have a name for it. People say, yeah, I have an issue with authority. I have an issue with commitment. But having said that, like, what is that robbing us of? We sort of say it it's a badge that we wear proudly. Many of us have had issues with authority and issues with commitment, for decades. Does it really serve me? Does it harm me? What is it preventing in my life to happen that's not happening? Just to acknowledge that you have an issue, or we have an issue with authority, or we have for all kinds of reasons, and we have an issue with commitment. Well, reflect on that. Maybe it's time to get rid of that one, if it doesn't serve you. So again, we're a good month, if not more, into this response. Both local, those of us here in Tampa Bay, we have our local response. We live in the state of Florida, we have our state response. We live in the United States of America, we have our American government response. We have the world response. I mean, there's a lot going on all around this virus. Interesting. How such a little thing can have such an effect. And that human beings, societies, governments can respond, whether they're doing it rightly or wrongly, intelligently or not, but it's amazing how quickly resources can be found and how quickly lifestyles can change overnight when we're scared. When we're afraid. When we don't want to die. When we don't want to be sick. And yet, so many wholesome things in this world. So many other significant problems, social, ecological. We historically say we can't change overnight. We don't have the resources. Very interesting. I think these times are very interesting. There's a lot to be learned here, but I leave it to the pundits to speak on that. So, there's a few moments, about 15 minutes. I would love to take, why don't you just close your eyes and just see, what's come up for you. Have any questions? And if you do, please go to the chat function, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, and Angie will be the one who will pass them on. So based on this talk that I've just shared and the practices, teachings, everything clear? Or if you have any questions, that's exactly what's been shared, how to practice it, how to bring it into the life. Again, this is the chewing. This is the process I was talking about. Everything very digestible, or are you not chewing on some things? Don't want to chew on some things. Not sure how to chew on some things. None of us are perfect, my friends. So again, just use the chat function and Angie will pass them on.
So here's a question from Wit. One of the three fierce mantras is, I don't really need anything to be happy, but we need an environment that supports and nourishes our practice. We need teachings and a teacher. Can you be more specific about that mantra?
Yeah, so well, it's actually just that wit. In other words, I don't need anything whatsoever, and then the implied is, but the Dharma. Right. So that's because we know that the Dharma, the teachings and the practices in the community that give support, allows us to deal with everything. And so, that is what we need, right? It's not I don't need anything. I don't need anything in terms of the things we usually think we need. But the problem with the things we usually think we need is they're not dependable. Right? We say, well, I need people. Well, people aren't always dependable. I need friends, I need my family, but they're not always dependable. Dependable in the sense that they will really fully support you and be there for you in a healthy way, because they have their stuff. Okay. Again, this thing is, I need the right conditions. Well, we can't control conditions. Sometimes we can. But like right now, this whole pandemic thing shows us we can't control. Here we are. 2 months ago, if somebody, showed up, on our internet screen and said, okay, starting tomorrow, nobody's going to go out. We're closing down basically the economy. You're going to have to stay home. You're going to have to be, you can't touch your eyes or your face anymore. You're going to have to be washing your hands obsessively. You're going to have to be wearing a mask whenever you go out, but we don't even want you going out. And if you see another human being, you got to stay at least 6 feet away from them, right? If somebody had said that to us 3 months ago, we would have gone, what? This is like, the beginning of authoritarian, neo-fascist, I don't know, whatever. And yet here we are, right? Here we are. So that shows us, the conditions change. And so, all we need is the Dharma. But I think if it shows us, no, we are lucky, right? Because in other times, if there was this kind of total shutdown, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have the virtual world. So we are very fortunate that even though there are very limitations, I certainly look forward to the day when I'm looking out in the hall and I don't see, cushions and mats and empty chairs. I look forward to seeing you all again live. But here we are. And we are fortunate that we can share the Dharma, practice the Dharma together as we're doing because of this virtual reality. But who knows if that's always going to be here? Right? It's all powered by electricity. It's, I don't even understand what it does. So, we don't know anything. So that's should fire us up to go, yeah, I got to take this stuff seriously, especially if you think that somehow this pandemic and the instability around it, and you take climate change and other kinds of things that other people are talking about, you might go, wow, this world, my world, may be moving into a period of greater and greater instability because of causes and conditions. If you believe that, then it behooves us to develop the internal resources, and as much as possible within our community, within our world, within our neighborhoods, relationships to deal with that. Thank you. Are there any other questions, Angie?
There are quite a few. There are several questions on the topic of the practice of reflection. So let's see if I can maybe bring those together. Carol says, I've been thinking that it might be very helpful to have deeper exploration of the practice of reflection. Maybe that's a good topic for a Dharma talk. And Autumn in Heaven said, I was in the process of typing something similar myself, wondering about reflection. And Susan said, this has been so helpful. Something that confuses me is this. Based on this and previous talks, there's enough for me to reflect and practice on for many months and years. How do we reflect and practice in each day? And then as more teachings come, how do we move from teaching to teaching and also practice the ones that stand out as teachings that we especially need?
Yeah, so again, let me make clear. Within Buddhism, there are practices, meditative practices that develop single point of concentration, calm, stable mind. There are practices that develop insight, and there are practices that are analytical, where we actually reflect and think about a topic. Okay? Now, this reflection is not new to us in the community. I've been talking about hear the teachings, reflect on the teachings, practice the teachings for decades. There's nothing new that I'm saying here, just a reminder. Now, what the Buddha was saying, again, remember, he was the teacher. And he was continuously teaching. He would continuously teach people who came to him with specific questions and issues, as well as he would give talks to his community. And this teaching he gave to them. So he's saying, when you hear me give you a teaching, whether it's about impermanence, whether it's about cause and effect, whether it's about suffering, whether it's about the four worldly winds, whether it's about non-self, whether, the Eightfold Path, the six, whatever teaching I am giving you, after you hear it, please reflect on it. Again, reflect on it in the way I said. First thing to reflect in is, before we contaminate the teaching with our own thoughts, which are often skewed or narrow, or, we don't have the language, you see. When I was in India in the mid-'70s and taking teachings from Tibetans, oftentimes my translators, they were not great. Many of the Tibetans had learned their English going to missionary schools or Christian schools because they were refugees. So they really didn't have any words for many of the concepts in Dharma. They had Christian words. So a teacher would be teaching and then they'd be translating it for me, and it would sound, the references were often, again, in a Christian context. Now, I was fortunate because I had a background in Buddhism before I was there, that I understood what he was saying, or she was saying. But that person who was speaking as the translator did not know that they had limited capacity, and the words they were using for what they were hearing from the teachings were not what the teacher's words really meant. All of us are limited by our language, our thoughts, our concepts. None of us are hearing clearly. But we want to get better at it. So please, when you first hear a teaching, first try to understand it in terms of just what it's saying. Do I understand this intellectually? Do I understand what the teaching, the words that are being said here? Do I really think, why is this teacher or writer saying this? What's their mind state? Why are they saying this? What's their experience? Then ask yourself, is this relevant for my life? Does this relate to my life, my conditioning, or the life of the world, or whatever? Get clear on that. And if it does, if I do think it's a good teaching, it has a good clarity about it, it does explain reality in a way that I didn't see it, it does make sense to me in terms of my own life and my own experience, but it's a check it out with your own experience, then practice it. Now, if you have to keep coming back to reflecting on it because you notice you still don't practice it in real life, then you have to keep reflecting. But there may be teachings and practices that you reflected enough that now you just go forward and you practice. You don't have to keep reminding yourself. But oftentimes we do. We have to keep reminding ourselves about impermanence, about sickness, old age, and death. Because, you look around the world, it doesn't look that way. So anyhow, these are different talks. But go on. Yes, other questions. I'm sorry.
There are a couple of questions related to the 6 knacks.
Uh-huh.
Josiah asked, how can we tell when we're moving away from neediness and allowing ourselves to just be without needing stimulation and activity versus when we're fooling ourselves and just being plain old lazy? And then another question from Max. I'm not sure exactly how to put the teaching of the 6 knacks into practice other than noticing how they arise during the day. Can you help me with this?
Yeah, so again, remember, neediness is coming from a sense, I need something, which has to come from a sense that somehow this moment, just as it is not meeting my needs. Whether there's no stimulation, it's boring, or whether this job, this person, this place, this whatever, this food, it's this mind of dissatisfaction. It's this mind where things are never quite right. And we think the problem is the situation, the person, the environment, whatever. And we don't realize that it's ourselves. Because if we ask ourselves, well, why am I doing this? Why am I wanting this? Why am I needing this? I mean, we know we need food. We know we need water. We know we need air. We know we need some degree of shelter and clothes. I mean, there are, basic needs. They're very obvious. Beyond that, what do I need? And watch your mind. How many of us are really willing to examine that closely? Our neediness. As for the question about how do you practice them, well, they all have their opposites. Maybe we can learn to have a knack for satisfaction, a knack for everything being okay in the present moment. We can have a knack for goodness and virtue and doing right and following the noble way. We can have a knack for doing no harm. and protecting. We can have a knack for, effort and energy and energetic application. We can have a knack for being responsible for one's own behavior and one's own mind states. We could empower ourselves. We have a knack for feeling empowered in this life and to act accordingly. And we have a knack for acting with right view, for seeing clearly. So I think the positive side of that is very obvious if we reflect. What is the opposite of these 6 sicknesses? What are the 6 healths? Or what would I rather have a knack for? Yes, Angie? I'm sorry, but I see there are other questions.
So there's a question. Do you think psychotherapy can help us trail the inner transformation path taught by the Buddha?
No, I don't think that psychotherapy can help us. The path of the Buddha is the path of the Buddha. It's a path of awakening. The Buddha's path transcends psychotherapy. Psychotherapy, and I say this as somebody who made a living from psychotherapy and loved being a psychotherapist, is really about helping people with problems of daily life and helping people primarily with problems of self. They don't like themselves. The self doesn't like life. I mean, they're actually problems of self, and therapy can be very helpful at helping us cope better with life. But psychotherapy is not a transformative path. It doesn't see beyond self. It doesn't really look at the fundamental causes of suffering. It looks at specific causes. It might say, well, the cause of this is because these things happened in your childhood. That is certainly true. And certainly that can be worked through. But it doesn't really get at the whole sense of, well, why is this such a problem for me? Maybe it's because at a deep level, I have a sense that it should have been different. I should have had different parents. I should have had different childhood experiences, which is very unempowering and doesn't really reflect on a deep understanding of causes and conditions. What is it that connects us with these original issues that have caused these, the original situations that have caused us to continue decades later to still be affected by these things that happened decades ago? Well, this has a lot to do with how we relate to our thoughts, how we relate to our stories, how we relate to our memories. So I'm just giving some examples. Can therapy be helpful to human beings in easing their immediate sufferings? Yes. But I think Dharma can be too if used in the right way. But Dharma goes much more. Dharma is a path of awakening and freedom from all suffering. And Dharma doesn't just talk about, working through afflictive emotions. Dharma is primarily about the cultivation of wholesome emotions, wholesome mind states, transformative mind states. It's a spiritual path. Yes.
Donna asked, I think using the mantras as mantras, repetition, may be a start. Is that correct?
Yeah, again, a mantra, or a fierce mantra. In the world of mantras, there are kind of benevolent mantras, Om Mani Padme Hum, and other kinds of mantras that kind of invoke deities and positive wholesome mind states, and et cetera, et cetera. Fierce mantras are like power ones. They're for breaking up obstacles. They're for destroying enemy, meaning internal enemies. That's what fierce mantras mean. Yeah, so we need to use them to remind us. Use them. Yeah, I can't control anything. You use that when the mind is wanting to control. Yeah, I don't know outcomes. Whatever will be, will be. We do that when we're worried or concerned or all that. You know, when we're needy. I don't need anything but Dharma. Right? So they're to be used. When are they to be used? When the obstacle arises. Use them. Take that mantra and just blast that that fixation away. You know, whenever you're feeling dissatisfied, the situation is fine. You know, I'm just misperceiving. I'm not using it to awaken, to see through my fixations and my narrowness. It doesn't mean the situation is easy. It doesn't mean there aren't things to be done. But I am not outside this situation kind of thinking it shouldn't be. So yeah, they are to be used. Maybe one more, but we need to probably stop soon.
Mauricio shared, thank you for the teaching. I have a bit of levity about the 6 knacks. I think of them as 6 snacks. My snacks should be wholesome. Just passing that one along.
Thank you for your creativity, Mauricio. But, you know, again, if you're going to snack on healthy food. And again, if you're going to have knacks for things that are good and wholesome and support our transformation. So good. So thank you all. So this has been kind of a review, a 30-day review of our practice together as a community during this time of the pandemic, Dharma medicine for the time of a pandemic. So hopefully today is this review, this stopping and reviewing has been helpful. And, you know, we don't know where we'll be in 30 days. Thank you.